Welcome to the debate. Okay, so I want you to just picture this. It is 1968.
Very calm and quiet year, obviously.
Exactly. No, you are standing on the Waseda University campus in Tokyo, and it is just intense, total chaos.
Right, tear gas everywhere.
Yeah, tear gas hanging in the air, thousands of students shouting through megaphones, literal barricades on fire. It is the absolute height of the global student protest movement.
It's a really heavy historical moment.
Exactly. But now imagine a young man standing right in the middle of all that storm. But instead of picking up a rock or shouting a slogan, he makes a completely different choice. He turns around.
He just walks away.
He walks right off campus. He goes down into this quiet, dimly lit basement in a totally different part of Tokyo, and he just carefully places a jazz record on a turntable.
Which is honestly the defining image of his entire life. You know, the loud, messy demands of the world happening above ground, and the quiet, super controlled music playing down below.
Right. It is this huge fundamental choice between the loud expectations of society and building a quiet personal space. So today we are talking about the life, the choices, and the massive literary impact of the famous Japanese author Haruki Murakami.
A very big topic.
It is. And to frame this, we are actually grounding our discussion today in a video essay that I made myself. It is designed by Hot Hoot, that's the channel name I use. I did all the ideation and design for it.
Yeah, and I have to jump in and say, it is a really high-quality video, like genuinely. I know a lot of American viewers are watching it right now, which makes total sense because it breaks down his whole origin story so clearly.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I really wanted to appeal to American audiences who maybe know his books but not his background. The video lays out the timeline of his early choices right next to the big historical events happening in Japan.
Which brings us directly to our core debate today. Because in the late 1960s, as all these protests burned through Japan, Murakami walked away from politics entirely to open a small jazz cafe called Peter Cat.
Right.
And then, later, he writes these incredibly famous books filled with, magical realism, stray cats, cold beer, and old jazz records. So the question is, was his choice to live this quiet, detached, chill life a brilliant way to find real honesty in a broken world? Or was he simply running away from the hard problems of society?
It is the ultimate question about his legacy, really. So here is where I stand. I believe Murakami's rejection of all that political chaos, his choice to just live a simple, honest life, that actually gave him the deep insight he needed to write absolute masterpieces about modern human loss.
And well, I believe Murakami's retreat into jazz cafes and magical stories is just a comfortable form of escape. I mean, it explains why he is so incredibly popular, sure, but it limits his true literary weight.
Okay, let's look at those early years to really see my point here. I see him as a writer who found his depth specifically because he separated himself from society.
By hiding in a basement.
Not hiding. No, he saw through the fake promises of the 1960s. In the video I designed by Hot Hood, I show this transition really clearly. Young Murakami actually supported the protests at first, but then he watched those big, beautiful ideas just turn into pure hatred and violence.
Right. The different student groups started attacking each other.
Exactly. It was mindless violence. He realized the fighting was completely empty. So at age 25, he makes this radical choice. He marries his wife, Yoko. They take out a huge bank loan.
Which is super risky at 25, by the way.
Oh, incredibly risky. And they open this tiny basement jazz cafe, Peter Cat. And I argue that this was a brave, constructive choice. Instead of shouting empty slogans, he chose a simple life he could actually control.
Scrubbing floors and brewing coffee.
Right. Scrubbing floors, playing vinyl records for small crowds. It felt real to him. It was a grounded reality over fake political dreams.
Okay, but I come at it from a different way. I see Murakami as the ultimate outsider, but, not in a brave way at all. I see a guy who simply chose not to participate in the hard struggles of his own society.
You really think he was just avoiding it?
Oh, absolutely. If you look at the raw facts from the timeline in your video, this is a man who placed himself in a smoky basement specifically to avoid the friction of the real world.
I mean, friction is one word for it. It was literal riots.
Sure, but when the world was demanding answers, when his entire generation was demanding actual structural change, he quite literally turned up the jazz music so he wouldn't have to hear them.
That is a little harsh, don't you think?
I don't think so. And this avoidance, it doesn't stop at the cafe. It becomes the whole blueprint for his books. His novels are hugely popular with young men in America today, right? But we have to ask why.
Because they are incredibly well written.
Well, yes, but also because it's focused on drinking beer, feeding cats, and just feeling this comfortable sadness. It's a great way to hide from real-world responsibilities. It is an easy aesthetic to adopt because you don't have to actually do any work to fix society.
Okay. I see why you think that, but let me give you a totally different way to look at how society works. You say he turned his back on society, but think of society like a giant, complicated engine.
Okay, I'm tracking with you.
In 1968, the young people correctly saw that the engine was broken. It was causing harm. But instead of fixing it, the protest movement became this broken gear itself, right? Just tearing its own teeth off from friction.
Sure, it got messy.
So stepping away to open a jazz cafe was not running away from his duty. It was refusing to be a broken gear. He stepped out of the machine completely to just build a very small, simple clock that actually worked.
That is a neat little analogy. But society is not a machine you can just casually step out of. We all have to live in it. That broken engine is still running, and it is still crushing vulnerable people.
But look at the people who stayed inside the machine. The facts we cover in the video make a huge point about this generation. The protests failed, and it just left this massive cold emptiness.
The burnout was real, yes.
More than burnout. Those radicals, the ones shouting in the streets, what did they do next? They cut their hair, put on business suits, and became the exact corporate workers they were protesting against. It was a massive betrayal of their own ideals. Murakami didn't do that.
He just brewed coffee.
He got a bank loan, worked crazy hard, and created a space for art and music. He stayed true to his values.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. Building a small, perfectly functioning clock in a basement while the rest of your generation is bleeding for a better world, that is the exact definition of privilege.
Privilege? Really?
Yes. Okay, sure, some protesters eventually became corporate salarymen. That is the tragic reality of growing up in a capitalist system. But at least they tried to push the boundaries when it mattered. Murakami didn't even try. He just checked out early.
He checked out because he saw that pushing back was literally destroying the people doing it.
But the world needs people to engage with the mess. If everyone just opened a jazz cafe when things got tough, nothing would ever improve. We'd have no civil rights movements, no labor laws, nothing.
I mean, his choice to listen to American jazz was a luxury. It was a safe little bubble. And my biggest issue is that this defensive bubble becomes the permanent setting for all his books. His characters never fight for anything. They just sit there.
That is a fascinating perspective. But I frame his literary universe completely differently. That bubble, as you call it, is exactly what acts as a mirror for a whole global generation.
How so? Because the emptiness he captured in that basement resonates so deeply. The failure of the 1960s movements created this universal feeling of grief, and that translates directly into his most famous realistic novel, Norwegian Wood.
Right, which in Korea is known as The Age of Loss, I believe.
Exactly, The Age of Loss. It is the perfect title, because that theme of profound loss connects youth across the entire globe. Think about it. The French youth after their failed revolution in May '68.
Yeah.
The American hippies moving into the '70s. The Korean youth dealing with the democratic struggles of the '80s. They all felt the exact same pain, hoping for a radically better world, and then watching that hope completely collapse.
I hear you.
When college students read Norwegian Wood, it makes their hearts ache because it speaks a totally universal truth.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered how easily that survival mechanism turns into just a commercial product?
A commercial product?
Yes. I mean, you bring up Norwegian Wood, which is his most grounded book, but look at his other massive global hits like 1Q84 or Kafka on the Shore. These books are super popular with young men, not because they teach deep survival, but because they offer a really entertaining, digestible escape.
You think it's just pure entertainment?
They give readers the feeling of being deep and lonely, but they wrap it in a fast-paced thriller plot. I mean, look at 1Q84. It was a massive bestseller in America.
Right, it was huge.
Why? Because it mixes a parallel world, mysterious cults, assassins, and, frankly, very attractive, mysterious women. It uses the vibe of profound sadness, but it doesn't ask the reader to do the hard work of actual self-reflection.
That's a bit of a stretch.
Is it? The main characters always live in perfectly decorated apartments. They cook simple but elegant meals. They drink imported beer. It is a highly curated, very cool aesthetic. I just question whether this work is truly profound, or if it is basically a lifestyle brand disguised as high literature.
Calling it a lifestyle brand is a huge misunderstanding of how people actually read his books. The pasta, the beer, the jazz, these physical things ground the magical elements in reality.
But it's also repetitive.
That repetition is the point. When the big world is completely out of your control, when governments fail and societies break, what can you actually control? You can control the exact temperature of the water for your spaghetti. You can control feeding a stray cat.
Right.
These aren't just cool quirks. They are survival mechanisms. They are small anchors in a totally chaotic universe. That is a deep understanding of modern life, not a lifestyle brand.
Okay, but handling your isolation by boiling pasta is not the same as creating challenging, transformative art. And I think that brings us to the ultimate test of literary greatness, right? The Nobel Prize in literature.
Here we go with the Nobel Prize.
Every single year, Haruki Murakami is mentioned as a favorite. The media talks about it endlessly, his fans wait for it, and every single year the committee chooses someone else.
Well, the Nobel Committee has its own political agenda. It doesn't define an author's true value.
Maybe, but look at who they do choose. The committee consistently rewards authors who tackle deep historical injustices or uncomfortable human suffering, like Gabriel Garcia Marquez for exposing violence in Latin America, or Toni Morrison for confronting the legacy of slavery.
Sure, those are heavy topics.
Meanwhile, Murakami writes about a detached young man drinking a beer looking for a missing sheep while listening to Miles Davis. It is incredibly fun to read, but the committee probably looks at it and thinks he lacks the serious moral weight for the world's highest literary honor.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because your definition of challenging power is way too narrow. Awards are just institutions. The true proof of a writer's greatness is their lasting impact on the human mind.
But what is the impact if they just disengage?
He challenges the ultimate modern power, which is the crushing emptiness of a highly structured capitalist society. He challenges the idea that we must all become busy, noisy corporate workers.
But his characters never actually challenge the system. They just float through it.
They challenge it by refusing to participate in the noise. His quiet, passive characters are a silent rebellion. In the video I designed, I point out this powerful phenomenon. If you read Murakami in your 20s, you will almost certainly end up rereading him for the rest of your life.
That is true. His fans are very loyal.
People reread him because as they grow older, they realize that changing the big system is often impossible. Finding peace in your micro-domestic world, your apartment, your cats, is a profound survival strategy. Passivity is not weakness. It is a mature form of acceptance.
I understand why people love him. I really do. And I respect the massive cultural footprint he has. The atmosphere he builds is completely intoxicating.
It really is.
But I still firmly believe that a truly great writer has to confront the darkness of society head-on, not just build a beautiful, jazz-filled shelter away from it. When he walked away from Waseda University in '68, he chose to be a passive observer of history.
Being an observer is literally the job description of a novelist.
Yes, but his characters take it to an extreme. They are passive observers in their own lives. Things just happen to them. A weird phone call rings, a mysterious woman vanishes, and they rarely take charge to fix the root problem.
Because root problems are often unfixable.
They just drink a beer and sigh. And that is exactly why young men today love him so much. He makes social passivity look incredibly cool and intellectual. It justifies wanting to just tap out of a complicated world.
See, I think you are confusing political passivity with philosophical acceptance. Sometimes the hardest, most mature thing a person can do is accept that they cannot change the entire world.
So you just give up?
No! You focus on being kind, maintaining your personal integrity, and living honestly in your own small corner. Opening the Peter Cat Cafe was an act of creation in a time when everyone else was focused on destruction.
Well, it was certainly a very successful act of personal creation, I'll give you that. He built a global literary empire out of that exact feeling of detachment.
Which I think naturally brings us to the end of our discussion today. We've covered a ton of ground, so let's clearly summarize our positions for the listeners.
Sounds good.
I strongly believe that Murakami's choice to step away from the tear gas and the broken political machine of the late 60s was the right move. It let him preserve his mind and create a beautiful, honest literary world. His focus on simple, daily routines really helps readers across the globe process their own feelings of modern isolation.
And I maintain my position that while his books are undeniably entertaining and beautifully written, his intense focus on a chill lifestyle and magical worlds is still a comfortable escape. It is a brilliant escape, sure, but it is a mechanism for avoiding the hard, messy work of improving the society we actually live in.
Despite our different views on his literary weight, we definitely have some strong points of agreement here. We both completely agree that his impact on readers, especially his influence on young men in America and global youth culture, is massive.
Oh, absolutely. His cultural footprint is permanent. He literally shaped how a generation views the world. And, we also strongly agree on the value of the historical context we use today.
Yes, the video essay.
The video designed by Haruki is a genuinely fantastic resource. Like I said, the quality is top-notch, and it captures the mood and the timeline of Murakami's early life perfectly. It really grounds all these abstract literary ideas in real, concrete history.
I appreciate that so much. Yeah, creating that under the Hot name was really about giving readers the exact background they need. Sometimes understanding a complex writer requires looking closely at both the art they created and the chaotic world they chose to leave behind.
Right.
Did he leave behind a moral duty to fix his society, or did he leave behind a toxic environment to find his true voice?
That is the ultimate beauty of literature, isn't it? A book is just a conversation between the author and the reader. You read the text, you look at the history, and you have to decide what it means to you personally.
Exactly. We highly recommend that you, the listener, explore the historical context we discussed today and then pick up one of Murakami's books, whether it is The Grounded Sadness of Norwegian Wood or The Magical Escape of 1Q84, and decide for yourself.
Keep that image of 1968 in your head.
Yes, the smoke of the tear gas is fading in the streets outside. The smoke of the basement jazz cafe is rising inside. Which smoke is blinding and which smoke is clear? Thank you for joining us on The Debate.